A high-level U.S. delegation from the Trump administration will head to Africa in March as the U.S. takes a fresh look at how it does business with the continent. Africa 54's Esther Githui-Ewart attended a panel discussion in Washington that brought together business experts who spoke extensively on how to level the playing field for U.S. trade in Africa.
The trade discussion took place at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce Erin Walsh says the Trump administration has a real appreciation for the economic and strategic importance of Africa.
Economic development across the continent is creating huge demand. Companies from China, India, Turkey, Japan, Europe, and the Middle East are actively pursuing commercial opportunities in Africa, and it is critical for the United States to pivot from an aid-focused to commercial engagement.
Thomas Hardy, the Director of Public Affairs and Congressional Relations at the U.S. Trade and Development Agency, says the agency is uniquely positioned to be a commercial driver to support U.S. industry's efforts and expand business opportunities across the continent.
It's important to look back at the President's national security strategy, where he specifically noted that China's investing in emerging markets to expand their influence and gain a competitive advantage against the United States. He further went on to say, specifically in Africa, that some Chinese practices are undermining Africa's long-term development by corrupting elites, dominating extractive industries, and locking countries into unsustainable debt.
I asked Florizel Lizer, President and CEO of the Corporate Council on Africa, what the U.S. focus in Africa should be, given China's aggressive business approach on the continent.
People act like China is the only country that's in Africa, and they're not. There's so many countries that are there because everyone recognizes it's what's the second fastest growing economy in the world. Their internet usage is growing 7 times faster than any other region in the world. Labor force is growing rapidly.
Walsh says the reality on the ground demands a strategic approach to share intelligence across all U.S. government agencies that have a piece of the economic engagement with Africa.
America will be competing in Africa. Anyone who has traveled to sub-Saharan Africa recently has seen the huge investment that the Chinese are making in support of their companies in the marketplace. For each person that we have on the ground, China has 40.
Dale Reniger is Executive Director, Global Government Affairs and Policy.
What we see is other governments focusing on specific projects, and this is greatly appealing to African leaders, and being able to say, here is a hospital that has been built, here is a railroad that has been built, here is a power plant that is up and running, is a lot more meaningful to them.
Burkina Faso's ambassador to the U.S., Seydou Kabore, highlighted what the African Development Bank calls the high fives that include a new vision of development for Africa.
The first one is to light up and power Africa through a new deal on energy for Africa to make energy affordable, reliable, and efficient. 2, feed Africa, unlock the agricultural potential to improve the life of more than 70% of the population, improve the quality of the life for the African people by enhancing education, technical skills, and health.
Most of Africa's rural areas do not have electricity, a key component for economic development. Edward Berry, Vice President of the Private Investment Corporation, spoke of his visit to Togo, which just a few years ago had minimal electricity capacity.
A U.S. company called Contour Global came in, we loaned them money, they set up a power plant, it tripled the country's capacity to generate electricity. Now they've got a chance to power their economy. We get paid back with interest. So that's your kind of classic case of development finance.
Liza says a letter sent to the African Union by President Trump in January stated that U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson will be visiting a number of African countries in March, while U.S. Secretary of Commerce Wilbur Ross plans to take the President's Advisory Committee on Doing Business in Africa late June or early July. Esther Githui-Ewart, VOA News, Washington.